Hey everyone, it's Synth Designer back again with another video. Today we're continuing our Sound Design Basics series. If you're a beginner, this video is really for you. Today I'm going to teach you the 6 sounds you need to learn for sound design. Now, this isn't only for beginners. You may have already been able to create music, but sound design is a whole other kind of monster to deal with. We kind of get used to these presets all over the place, or maybe you deal with only analog instruments or ones that don't even require sound design that are kind of pre-built. And that's fine, but to really get a better understanding of electronic music and even maybe enhance your other types of music, you really want to get a hold of how to kind of create the basics that I'm going to talk about today. Now, the 6 sounds are a sustained bass with a sub, a pad, a bouncy bass, a pluck sound, a saw layer lead type of sound, and some keys. There's a lot of ways to create these sounds, but these sounds are kind of what I would think of as kind of the most fundamental sounds in all of sound design. If you know how to create these, you will be able to create so many different types of sounds, and you'll find that you'll quickly be able to really expand your horizons. And it doesn't matter what kind of music you make, it will really help you understand how to get better and how to start making better music, because you'll be able to create the sounds that you want and not just rely on presets. So let's get right into it. As you can see, I have Vital open. This is a free synth. I'm going to use Serum as well, but for now, let's start with Vital. Let's start with that keys type of sound. Now, when we think of keys, we often think of a kind of a piano, and it's a little difficult to recreate pianos on some of these synths, and there are ways of doing it, but that's not our kind of main focus. What a key sound is and can be is what I think of kind of like e-pianos. It has that kind of similarity to piano, but it's often warmer, but it has similar characteristics, and I'll show you how to do it. So let's just start with an initialized preset here. What we're going to do is get the basic shapes here, and we're actually going to use a sine wave here. So now, the most important part about a keys sound is the ADSR, in my opinion. Now, if you're not familiar with ADSR, go check out my other videos in Sound Design Basics, including my one on ADSR for beginners. It's really, if you don't understand how to use the attack, decay, sustain, and release, then you're really not going to get very far in sound design. So I'm going to assume that you at least know a little bit about that. And what we're going to do here is turn down the sustain. And as you can feel and hear, that sound isn't fully sustained, right? It's kind of descending as it goes up and then comes down, right? So if we have it all the way up, it's just a full sustained sound. But what happens when we have it down here? What we're going to do here is turn up the release a little bit. And now we have a similar kind of basic key sound here. So the great thing is there is some sustain, so we can play chords over top of it, right? But it has some pluckiness to it as well. That wouldn't be possible if the sustain was all the way up. Now we can change the character of it as well. So let's add a saw, turn on the filter here. We're going to turn the resonance down a little bit. Let's turn the filter on oscillator 2. What we can also do is turn the decay down and play with that a little bit. And then let's turn the sustain a little bit down now. Let's turn some effects on a little bit, maybe some reverb and some delay, kind of give it a little bit more character. Here we'll turn on the stereo here. Turn down the feedback a little bit and see how this sounds. Turn down the mix a little bit. Maybe turn up the mix of the reverb. Turn up the volume just a little bit. And we can even open up the filter a little bit more. And there you have it. You have a basic keys type of sound. So that's our first sound there. Okay, let's move on to our next sound. This next sound is going to be a saw layer. Now, I call this a saw layer, but this could be used as a lead, and it's very, very basic. The thing about saws is it has a ton of harmonic character, which means it has just a lot of variability, and it can produce a lot of kind of upper harmonics and richness. So I'm going to show you how simple this is. You take a basic saw here, and what we could do is one of a few things. We can turn the sustain all the way down. Maybe turn up the decay a little bit. Or you can just keep the sustain all the way up. Up to you. And then what we're going to do is turn up the voicing here. Each VST is going to be a little bit different on how the voicings work. In Vital, you turn up the voicing, and then the detune here. You'll have to tune it essentially to your liking. So the less detune here, the more on key it's going to be, the more detuned, the less on key it's going to be, right? Let's find something about here. And now we have just this great layer that we can use, either for chords or for leads. And then great thing is, apply a filter and all of a sudden you get a lot of different character to it too. In electronic music, you'll find saws all over the place. It's one of the most commonly used wave shapes, especially for leads, because it cuts through the mix so well. And what we did with this voicing is we really turned up the kind of width to it. Rather than it being on one voice where it's just straight down the middle, adding unison here adds spaciousness, and just a lot of different character. What you can also do is turn it way up, turn the voices way up, add another oscillator with another saw, make sure to put that on the filter, and now you're getting some big sound here. One thing you could do is keep this one on one voice, have a little bit in the middle, have a little bit on the sides, or turn this up too. And now you have a classic kind of super saw. And that's just a great way of using the saw wavetable and a super simple but effective method for sound design. Our next sound design method is the pluck. Plucks are used primarily as a lead, but you'll find them all over the place as well. Sometimes they're chords, sometimes they're complementing pads. You know, you'll hear a big spacious pad, and then you'll hear a kind of a plucky sound. Now, how do we create that? Again, the most important part here is the ADSR. So what we're going to do is turn the sustain all the way down, then just turn the decay down as well. The more you turn it down, the less of a sound you have and the more plucky sound you have. So now, simple as that, we have a pluck. Maybe we'll turn up the volume just because we put a filter on it. And as you can see, even if I hold the chord down, it's only playing that note. Let's put it to the test in a very basic example here. Let's form some chords. So I took this very basic 2-chord progression. So what we're going to do here is have this one synth play this as a pad. So what we're going to have is a sustain sound. Then the next thing is we're going to have this as a kind of a plucky sound. So let's take this and turn it into a pad. Open up another instance of Vital. Let's maybe put a filter on this, see how this sounds. Another kind of saw pad here. We're going to copy and paste this into a new pattern with our pad here. And then we're going to go back, pattern 1. And what we're going to do here is make this into just nice little plucks here. And we're going to put this into our playlist. And pattern 2. And we're going to see how they kind of complement each other. Now this is as basic as it gets, but you can see the plucks are kind of adding a rhythmic element while the pad gives it that sustained sound. So plucks are really meant to kind of give a rhythmic element to it. The next sound here is a pad. So a pad is essentially a sound that fills up a lot of space. You may have heard this term before, but a lot of electronic music has pads that kind of give an atmosphere. There's tons and tons of different pads, tons of ways of creating them. Here's the most basic way of doing it here. What we're going to do is just turn up a saw wave put a lot of voices on it, turn down the detune because it kind of depends what you're doing, but pads tend to have kind of a softer sound. With a lot of detune, it's going to be pretty harsh. Then the next thing you're going to do is put a filter on. We're not going to mess with the envelope here. We're going to leave it as is, and let's listen to how it sounds. And you could do a lot of different things with pads. As you can hear, it's kind of got that warmth because of the filter. And you can open up the filter. And that's just a basic way of creating a pad. You could use lots of different types of wave shapes as well. Let's open up a different wave shape and see how they sound with a saw. A sine is going to introduce a lot of that lower element. There's a triangle here. You can even add some different octaves. Or you can even try different semitones. And that's how you create a pad. Now here we have our next sound, and this is a plucky bass. Plucky basses are used in all sorts of electronic music, and you need plucky basses to kind of create those cool rhythms. There's tons of ways that plucky basses are used in music. If you think about funk music, for example, you'll have those cool bass lines, and in the electronic music, that's often the same type of principle. We want a plucky bass so we can create cool rhythms. Rather than a sustained bass, which is kind of the bedrock of a sound, a plucky bass can add a lot of cool rhythm. Here, as you can see, this is from a preset pack of mine called Synthwave Essentials Volume 2. If you go to synthdesigner.com, you could download all of this preset pack absolutely free, no signups required. This is very simple and it relies on a couple things. First, you have your first envelope having this no sustain and lower decay. Next thing is you'll have a similar shape envelope 2 and you'll attach it to your filter. What that does, it gives it a little bit more pop and opens up the filter with every pluck, but it quickly goes back down. The wave shapes can really be up to you. A sine gives you that nice thick low end, while the saw wave here, as you'll hear, adds that grit and dimension to it. You'll also see I have a sub here. You could turn this on or off. It's really up to you and what you're doing. But a plucky bass adds that kind of rhythmic element, and it's very basic to set up. Don't worry about doing voices of unison, because in a bass, you'll often want it up the middle. That doesn't mean you can't do multiple voices of unison, but generally speaking, basses tend to have a very centered sound. Now, the last fundamental sound that we're going to do is a sustained bass with some sub frequencies. Now, you'll think of basses oftentimes as things with sub bass frequencies. However, there's things called top basses where they're primarily used as kind of a complement to basses. So it's not necessarily the fact that just because it's a bass is going to have a lot of sub information. In this case, what we're going to do is have a sustained bass with sub information. Now, in this case, we're going to create what's called a respace. And a respace has been used in electronic music over the past, decade plus, and it's a really popular sound. Let's hear it. As you'll see, this is also from my 2010 EDM preset pack. It's not out yet, but if you're a Patreon member, this was one of those packs that is part of my monthly releases. So go to my Patreon page and you can get these among others, or just wait a little bit and this pack will be out in no time at synthdesigner.com for free. So let's just look at how to create this thing. It relies on saw waves, first of all, and unlike the last bass, what we're going to have is several voices of unison to give that kind of wide sound. We have a filter here. Because it's a saw wave, we want to cut off a lot of those harsh frequencies while keeping the bass character intact. We're not doing anything with the envelope here because it's a sustained bass, so we need the sustain all the way up. Then with Serum, we can add the sub bass right here. You can do this in a couple of ways. If you don't have a dedicated sub in your synth, then what you'll do is just lower the octaves, and then that's what you'll have. Both of these are two octaves down. Lastly, you'll add some distortion here. You can either add this within your synth, or you could do this through a third-party application as well. As you can hear, most of that kind of grit is already coming from these saw waves here. Now there's other types of sustained basses, and The principle is that this fills up a lot more space in the mix. Because of the width, it's going to be a lot more of a predominant sound, but you don't necessarily need that width. You can have a sustained bass, and that's going to impact just how things sound. But remember, that's going to be completely opposite of your pluck bass. Your pluck bass is meant to have a more rhythmic element, while this is supposed to be kind of like the foundational sound, setting the bass, no pun intended, of the song. It's going to be like the bedrock. So those are the 6 fundamental sounds of sound design. Hopefully as a beginner, you kind of appreciate some of the basics that we learned today, and hopefully you can see how some of these sounds can really make an impact in your music and how they've made an impact on music throughout the last several decades. These are fundamental sounds that everybody should learn and everybody should have in their arsenal, just so you can build off of these. If you feel like you're ready to build off of these sounds, check out my other videos on sound design. There's so many different types of sounds out there that I create and I show you how to create. And if you're ready to kind of move on from this, go check out my preset packs, both for Serum and Vital at synthdesigner.com, absolutely free. So I hope you like this video, and I'll see you next time.